The scream that tore from Emma Thornton's throat, as her mare stumbled on the rocky trail, echoed through the Colorado Canyon like a gunshot. And then there was nothing but the sickening crack of bone against stone and the world going dark. When she opened her eyes 3 days later in the back room of Doc Hendrick's dusty office in Silver Ridge, the first thing she saw was the grim set of the old physician's weathered face, and the second thing she noticed was that she couldn't feel her legs. "Miss Thornton, you're awake," Doc Hendrick said, setting down the tin cup he'd been holding. His voice carried the weight of bad news, the kind that settles in a room like smoke and refuses to clear. "I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you." Emma tried to sit up, but pain lanced through her spine like white lightning. She gasped, her fingers clutching at the rough wool blanket covering her. "My legs," she whispered. I can't feel them properly." The doctor pulled up a wooden chair, its legs scraping against the floorboards. It was August of 1876, and the late afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air between them. "You took a bad fall. Your horse threw you when she spooked at her rattler, according to the ranch hand who found you. You've got a fractured vertebra in your lower back and the damage to your spine." He paused, choosing his words with the care of a man who knew their weight. "Emma, the chances of you walking right again are slim to none. The best you might hope for is a cane, maybe crutches, but even that's uncertain." The words hit her like a physical blow. Emma Thornton, at 22 years old, had been the best horsewoman in Fremont County. She'd grown up on her father's ranch, learning to ride before she could properly read, breaking horses that grown men feared to approach. Her mother had died when she was 10, and her father had followed 6 months ago, leaving her the ranch and a handful of loyal hands who'd stayed on despite uncertain wages. She'd been riding the property line, checking fences, doing the work that needed doing because there was no one else to do it. "No," she said, and her voice cracked. "No, that can't be right. I have to walk. I have a ranch to run. I have responsibilities." Doc Hendrick's expression softened with pity, and Emma hated that look more than she'd ever hated anything. "I'm sorry, girl. I truly am. You've got some sensation, which is more than many have after an injury like this, but the damage is severe. You'll need someone to care for you now." "I don't need anyone," Emma said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were a lie. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. Thornton women didn't cry. Her mother had taught her that before the fever took her. Her father had reinforced it with every hard season, every drought, every loss. The door to the room opened, and a man stepped inside. Emma had never seen him before. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorframe. His hair was dark as coal dust, slightly too long, curling at the collar of his faded blue shirt. His face was tanned from long hours in the sun, with strong features that might have been carved from the same granite that made up the Rocky Mountains visible through the window. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a startling gray blue that reminded her of storm clouds gathering over the plains. "Doc," the man said, his voice a low rumble. "Mrs. Patterson said you needed help moving some supplies." "Ah, Cole," Doc Hendrick stood. "Actually, I'm glad you're here. This is Emma Thornton. Emma, this is Cole Brennan. He's been working at the Murphy Ranch the past few months." Cole's gaze shifted to Emma, and she saw something flicker in those storm-colored eyes. Sympathy, perhaps, but not pity. There was a difference she was learning. He removed his hat, holding it respectfully. "Ma'am," he said simply. "Mr. Brennan," Emma replied, her voice stiff. She didn't want strangers seeing her like this, broken and helpless in a bed that smelled of carbolic and camphor. "Cole's got experience with difficult situations," Doc Hendricks continued. "He served as a medical orderly during the war, helped transport wounded soldiers. I was thinking he might be able to help get you back to your ranch, make sure you're settled." "I can manage," Emma said quickly. "With respect, ma'am, I don't think you can," Cole said, and his bluntness surprised her. Most men would have danced around the truth, offered platitudes and false reassurances. Doc says you can't walk. Your ranch is 5 miles outside of town. You've got hands there, but none of them know the first thing about caring for someone with a spine injury. And you do. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Something dark crossed Cole's face, a shadow of old pain. I carried my share of broken men off battlefields, ma'am. Saw what worked and what didn't. I'm not saying I'm any kind of expert, but I know more than most. Doc Hendricks cleared his throat. Emma, you need help. Your pride won't run that ranch, and it certainly won't help you heal. Cole here is between jobs. The Murphy Ranch just sold, and the new owners are bringing in their own crew. He could stay on at your place for a while, help you manage until you figure out what comes next. I don't have money to pay another hand, Emma said, even as she felt the walls closing in. The truth was, she barely had money to pay the 3 men who'd stayed loyal to her father's memory. I don't need much, Cole said. Room and board and whatever you can spare when you can spare it. I'm not looking to get rich, Miss Thornton, just looking for honest work. Emma studied him, trying to read the truth in his weathered face. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30, old enough to have seen things, done things. There was a hardness about him, the kind that came from living rough, but his eyes were steady and clear. Not a drinker, then. And the way he held himself spoke of confidence without arrogance. Why would you want to work for a crippled woman on a failing ranch? She asked, the bitterness creeping into her voice despite her best efforts. Because everyone deserves a chance, Cole said simply. And from what I hear around town, you've been running that ranch on your own since your father passed. That takes grit. Seems to me you've earned some help. The tears threatened again, and Emma turned her face toward the window. The sun was starting to sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere out there was her ranch, her home, her father's legacy. She thought of the horses in the barn, the cattle scattered across the summer grazing lands, the vegetable garden her mother had planted 20 years ago that Emma still tended. She thought of giving up, of selling it all, of becoming one of those tragic figures people whispered about in town, the crippled Thornton girl. All right, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. All right, Mr. Brennan, you can help me get home. We'll figure out the rest from there. Cole nodded once, a sharp dip of his chin. I'll get things ready for transport tomorrow morning. Doc says you need another day of rest before you're moved. After he left, Emma closed her eyes and tried to will herself to feel her legs, to move her toes, to do anything that would prove the doctor wrong. She felt a tingling sensation, a promise of something, but when she tried to move, nothing happened the way it should. Her body had betrayed her, and she didn't know how to forgive it. That night, she dreamed of running, of racing her mare across open fields with the wind in her hair and the ground solid and certain beneath her feet. She woke to the gray light of dawn and the crushing remembrance that those days were gone. Cole arrived as promised, driving a wagon he'd borrowed and lined with blankets and straw to cushion the journey. Doc Hendricks had given her laudanum for the pain, but Emma refused it. She wanted to feel everything, to understand exactly what her body could and couldn't do. The trip back to the ranch was agony. Every rut in the road, every stone beneath the wagon wheels sent jolts of pain through her spine. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, refusing to cry out. Cole drove carefully, choosing his path with more attention than most freight drivers would give to a load of fine china. He didn't try to make conversation, didn't offer useless comfort. He simply drove, occasionally glancing back to check on her, his expression unreadable. The Thornton ranch appeared as they crested a low hill, and Emma felt her heart clench. The house was small, just 4 rooms, but her father had built it with his own hands from lumber hauled from Denver. The barn was larger, sturdy enough to withstand the brutal Colorado winters. Corrals spread out behind it, and beyond that, grazing land stretched toward the mountains. It wasn't much, but it was hers. 3 men emerged from the barn as the wagon rolled into the yard. Tom Westerly, her father's oldest friend, was first. He was 56, with a face like old leather and a heart bigger than the territory. Behind him came the younger hands, Jack Murphy, no relation to the ranch family, just 20 years old and still learning, and Samuel Ortiz, a quiet man of 30 who could rope better than anyone Emma had ever seen. "Miss Emma," Tom said, and his voice was rough with emotion. He'd been the one to find her, had ridden like hell to get her to town. "Thank God, we've been worried sick." "I'm alive, Tom," Emma said, trying to smile. "That's something, Doc says." Tom paused, struggling with the words. "Doc says I won't walk right again," Emma finished for him. "Maybe not at all, but I'm not dead and I'm not giving up this ranch." The men exchanged glances, worry evident on their faces. Cole climbed down from the wagon and came around to the back. "Let's get her inside," he said. "She needs to rest." Before Emma could protest, Cole had slid his arms beneath her, one under her knees and one behind her back, and lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all. The sudden movement made her gasp, and she instinctively clutched at his shoulders. Through the fabric of his shirt she could feel the solid muscle, the strength that came from years of hard work. "I can," she started to say, but the words died. She couldn't. She couldn't do this herself, and the realization was like swallowing broken glass. Cole carried her into the house, ducking slightly to clear the doorframe. Tom hurried ahead to open the door to her bedroom. It was a simple room with an iron frame bed covered in one of her mother's quilts, a wardrobe her father had bought in Denver, and a small table with a washbasin. Cole laid her on the bed with surprising gentleness. "Thank you," Emma said stiffly. "It's what I'm here for," Cole replied. He straightened, looking around the room. "You'll need a chamber pot close by, and someone should bring your meals. Doc gave me a list of exercises you should try, ways to keep your muscles from wasting. We'll start those tomorrow." Over the next few days, a routine established itself. Cole moved into the small room off the barn that had been her father's office, keeping a respectful distance. Each morning, he came to the house to help Emma with the exercises Doc Hendricks had prescribed. They were simple movements, attempts to bend her knees, to flex her feet, to maintain what mobility she had. Emma gritted her teeth through each session, sweat beading on her forehead from the effort and pain. Cole was patient but firm, never letting her quit when frustration made her want to throw something. "One more," he'd say. "You can do one more." And somehow she always did. In the afternoons, he'd carry her outside to a chair set up in the shade of the porch, where she could at least see her ranch, watch the men work, feel the sun on her face. It was better than staring at the ceiling of her bedroom, but it also made her heart ache. She should be out there working alongside them. Instead, she was as useless as a broken wheel. "Talk me through what needs doing," Cole said one afternoon, settling onto the porch steps below her chair. "With the ranch, what would you be doing if you could?" Emma was surprised by the question. Most people seemed to assume that her injury had somehow also damaged her mind, her ability to think and plan. "Checking the water situation," she said. "We've got 3 good springs, but in August they sometimes run low. The cattle need to be moved to the higher pastures where the grass is still green. And the barn roof needs patching before winter. There's a leak over the 3rd stall." Cole nodded, pulling out a small notebook and a pencil stub. He began writing. "What else?" She told him everything, all the tasks that crowded her mind, all the worries that kept her awake at night. He listened and wrote, asking clarifying questions, treating her knowledge with respect. When she finally ran out of words, he looked up at her. "I'll talk to Tom and the others, make sure it all gets done," he said. "But Emma, you need to understand something. You can't run this ranch the way you used to, not right now. Maybe not ever. That doesn't mean you have to give it up, but it does mean you need to let other people help. Let them be your legs for a while." The words were hard to hear, but they weren't unkind. Emma nodded slowly. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "I've been taking care of myself since I was 10 years old." "I know something about that," Cole said quietly. He stood, tucking the notebook into his pocket. "But there's a difference between being strong and being stubborn. One keeps you alive. The other just makes you miserable." He walked away before she could respond, heading toward the barn where Tom was working. Emma watched him go, this stranger who'd inserted himself into her life, and felt something shift in her chest. Not gratitude, not quite. Something more complicated. The days began to blur together, marked by small victories and crushing setbacks. One morning, Emma managed to flex her left foot almost normally. She'd been so excited that she'd called for Cole, and when he saw what she could do, a genuine smile had broken across his face, transforming it entirely. "That's real progress," he'd said. "That's proof you can heal." But 2 days later, when she tried to do it again, nothing happened. Her foot remained stubbornly motionless, and Emma had broken down crying for the first time since the accident. Cole had simply pulled up a chair and sat with her, not trying to fix it, not offering false hope. Just present. September arrived with cooler nights and the first hints of gold in the aspen leaves. Cole had proven himself invaluable, not just to Emma but to the entire operation. He had a way of seeing what needed doing and simply doing it, never complaining, never cutting corners. The other hands had warmed to him quickly. Tom, in particular, seemed relieved to have someone to share the burden of keeping things running. Emma had started taking her meals at the kitchen table, with Cole carrying her there each morning and evening. The first few times had been humiliating, being hauled around like a sack of grain, but she'd grown accustomed to it. There was something steady about Cole, something that made her feel safe even when she was at her most vulnerable. One evening, after the others had eaten and gone, Emma worked up the courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her for weeks. "Why are you really here, Cole? And don't tell me it's just for the work. You could get hired on at any of the bigger ranches for better pay." Cole had been cleaning the dishes, his back to her. He paused, his hands still in the soapy water. "I told you, everyone deserves a chance." "That's not an answer." He turned, drying his hands on a towel. For a long moment he just looked at her, and Emma saw the walls he kept around himself, the careful distance he maintained. Then, slowly, he pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "I had a younger sister," he said finally. "Lily. She got sick when she was 16, some kind of infection in her lungs. She survived it, but it left her weak. She couldn't do much without getting winded, couldn't work the way she needed to help support the family. My father," he paused, his jaw tightening. "My father saw her as a burden. He was going to send her to live with relatives, basically abandon her because she wasn't useful anymore." "What happened?" Emma asked softly. "I left home and took her with me. We made our way for about 3 years, me working whatever jobs I could find, her doing what she could. Then the war started and I signed up because the pay was better and more reliable. I sent money home to her, made sure she was taken care of." His voice had gone flat, emotionless. "She died anyway, winter of '63, pneumonia. I was somewhere in Tennessee, carrying wounded boys not much younger than her, and I couldn't be there when she needed me most." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry." "Point is," Cole continued, meeting her gaze, "I know what it's like to be written off because your body doesn't work the way it should. And I know what it's like to need someone to believe in you when you can't believe in yourself. So when Doc Hendricks asked if I'd help you, I didn't see a crippled woman or a failing ranch. I saw someone who needed what I could give. Maybe helping you is my way of making up for not being able to help Lily." The honesty of his words struck Emma like a physical force. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. His skin was rough, calloused from years of rope and reins. "You're a good man, Cole Brennan." He looked down at their joined hands and something flickered across his face, quick as summer lightning. "I'm just doing what's right." But Emma saw more than that. She was starting to see him, really see him. The way he gentled the horses with the same patience he showed her. The quiet competence with which he handled every task. The strength that wasn't just physical but ran deeper into the core of who he was. And she realized, with a start that made her breath catch, that she looked forward to the mornings when he'd come to help her with her exercises, to the evenings when they'd sit and talk about the ranch, about nothing, about everything. October brought the first snow, just a dusting that melted by noon but served as a warning. Winter was coming, and Emma had never felt less prepared. Her progress with her legs had been frustratingly slow. She could feel them better now, could sometimes move her toes, could bend her knees slightly on good days. But she couldn't bear weight, couldn't stand without collapsing. "Doc Hendricks says you're doing better than he expected," Cole told her one morning as they worked through the exercises. He had his hands on her leg, helping her try to lift it. "The fact that you've got this much sensation back is remarkable." "It's not enough," Emma said, frustration sharp in her voice. "At this rate, I'll be in this chair for years." "Maybe," Cole said, and she appreciated that he didn't lie to her. "Or maybe next month you'll wake up and be able to stand. Bodies are strange things, Emma. They heal in their own time." "I don't have time," she snapped. "Winter's coming. We'll need to bring the herd down from the high pasture, make sure we've got enough feed stored. I should be helping with all of that." "You are helping," Cole said firmly. "You're the one telling us what needs doing. You're the one making the decisions. That's what running a ranch really is, Emma. It's not about how well you can sit a horse. It's about knowing the land, knowing the animals, knowing what needs to happen and when. You've got that knowledge in your head. We're just your hands and legs for now." His words should have comforted her, but instead they made her want to scream. She didn't want to be just a head giving orders. She wanted to feel the horse beneath her, wanted to work until her muscles ached and her hands were blistered. She wanted her life back. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Emma lay awake staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet except for the usual settling sounds, the creak of wood and whisper of wind. She tried once more to move her legs, concentrating with every ounce of will she possessed. Her right leg shifted slightly, just a few inches. It wasn't much, but it was something. Encouraged, she tried again. This time, she managed to bend her knee almost halfway. Hope flared in her chest, bright and painful. She kept trying over and over until exhaustion dragged her under. The next morning, Cole found her still in bed, which was unusual. She was normally awake before him, impatient to start the day. "Emma," he knocked softly on the doorframe. "You all right?" "I moved my leg," she said, and her voice was hoarse. "Last night, I moved it on my own." Cole's expression shifted, hope and concern warring. "Show me." Emma concentrated, and after a moment her right leg shifted, then her left. The movements were small, jerky, far from normal, but they were movements she'd initiated, controlled. "I did this for hours last night," she admitted. "I couldn't stop trying." "That's incredible progress," Cole said, coming to kneel beside the bed. "But Emma, you need to be careful. You could hurt yourself, push too hard." "I don't care," Emma said fiercely. "Don't you see? This means I might walk again, really walk, not just shuffle with a cane. I have to keep trying." Cole studied her face and she saw understanding there mixed with worry. "All right," he said slowly. "But we do this smart. Controlled exercises, not just thrashing around in the dark, and if something hurts, really hurts, you stop. Deal, deal." From that day forward, the exercises intensified. Cole built a set of parallel bars in the house, crude but functional, fashioned from two long pieces of wood supported by sawhorses. Each morning and evening, he'd help Emma try to stand, to put weight on her legs while gripping the bars. The first few attempts ended with her legs buckling immediately. But slowly, painfully, she began to hold herself up for a few seconds at a time. "You're stronger than you think," Cole said one evening, spotting her as she gripped the bars with white-knuckled intensity. Sweat dripped down her face despite the cold air seeping through the walls. She'd been standing, actually standing with most of her weight on her own legs, for nearly 30 seconds. "I feel like I'm going to pass out," Emma gasped. "5 more seconds," Cole said. "You can do 5 more." Emma wanted to curse him, wanted to collapse, but she gritted her teeth and held on. Her legs trembled violently, muscles screaming. Cole counted down, and when he reached 0, she let herself fall. He caught her smoothly, lowering her into the chair. "A minute total today," he said, and there was pride in his voice. 3 weeks ago you couldn't stand for more than 5 seconds. Emma's head fell back against the chair, her chest heaving. "This is the hardest thing I've ever done." I know. Cole knelt in front of her, and when she opened her eyes, his face was close to hers. But you're doing it. Every day you're getting stronger. Looking into his storm-gray eyes, Emma felt something shift inside her, something that had been building for weeks now. She'd been so focused on her injury, on her anger and grief and frustration, that she hadn't let herself acknowledge what else she was feeling. But in this moment, with his hands still steadying her, his face showing genuine pride in her progress, she couldn't deny it anymore. She was falling in love with Cole Brennan. The realization terrified her. Love made people vulnerable, made them weak. She'd seen it with her father after her mother died, the way grief had hollowed him out. She'd sworn she'd never let anyone have that kind of power over her. But Cole had slipped past her defenses while she wasn't looking, had made himself essential not just to her ranch but to her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything you've done, for believing I could get better when even I didn't believe it." Something flickered in Cole's eyes, an emotion she couldn't quite name. His hand came up, hesitating, then brushed a strand of sweat-dampened hair from her face. "You make it easy to believe," he said, his voice rough, the moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Cole cleared his throat and stood, putting distance between them. "You should rest. We'll do another session after dinner." Emma watched him go, her heart still racing from more than just the physical exertion. She needed to tell him how she felt, but fear held her tongue. What if he didn't feel the same way? What if he saw her only as a responsibility, a debt to repay for the sister he couldn't save? The thought of his pity was unbearable. November settled over the ranch with gray skies and bitter cold. The cattle were safely down from the high country, the barn roof was patched, and the hands had stored enough feed to get them through until spring. Against all odds, the Thornton ranch was ready for winter, and Emma was walking. It wasn't graceful. She needed a cane, and her gait was uneven, her left leg still weaker than her right. But she could stand on her own, could take halting steps, could move from room to room under her own power. The first time she'd made it from her bedroom to the kitchen without help, Tom had actually cried. Cole had smiled, that rare full smile that transformed his face, and said simply, "Knew you could do it." But with her increasing independence came a growing worry. Cole had been hired to help her because she couldn't walk. Now that she could, even imperfectly, did he still have a reason to stay? The thought of him leaving made Emma's chest tight with panic. She needn't have worried. Cole showed no signs of going anywhere. He'd become part of the ranch's rhythm, as essential as Tom or the horses or the land itself. He worked alongside the other hands, took his meals with the group, sat with Emma in the evenings discussing plans for spring. One night, after everyone else had gone, Emma worked up the courage to ask, "Will you stay? After winter, I mean. When the ranch is running full and I don't need as much help." Cole had been stoking the fire in the hearth. He paused, his back to her. "Do you want me to stay?" "Yes." The word came out more forcefully than she'd intended. "I mean, you're good with the stock and the men respect you. It would be foolish to lose a good hand." Cole turned, and there was something searching in his gaze. "Is that the only reason?" Emma's breath caught. This was the moment. She could play it safe, could retreat behind practicality and pretend her feelings didn't exist. Or she could be brave, could risk her heart the way she'd been risking her body every day in those exercises. "No," she said quietly, "it's not the only reason." Cole crossed the room, coming to stand in front of her chair. "I need you to tell me, Emma. I need to hear you say it, because if I'm wrong about what I think I see in your eyes, if I'm just seeing what I want to see—" "You're not wrong." Emma reached up, taking his hand. "I love you, Cole. I think I have for a while now. I know it's foolish. I know you probably just see me as a job, as some kind of penance for your sister, but I can't keep it to myself anymore." For a moment, Cole didn't move. Then he knelt, bringing himself level with her, his other hand coming up to cup her face with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Emma Thornton, you are the strongest, most stubborn, most remarkable woman I've ever met. And I fell in love with you the first time I carried you into this house, and you looked at me like you wanted to punch me for daring to help. I did want to punch you, Emma said, laughing even as tears spilled down her cheeks. I know. Cole smiled, his thumb brushing away her tears. You've never been good at accepting help. But Emma, loving you isn't about paying a debt. It's not about Lily, though I think she'd have liked you. It's about you. The way you fight, the way you refuse to give up even when everything seems impossible. The way you care for this land and the people on it. I'm in love with you and I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to go. Emma pulled him closer, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, both of them testing this new territory. Then Emma's hand slid to the back of his neck and Cole's arms wrapped around her, and the kiss deepened into something fierce and claiming. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it's fast, I know we should probably wait and court properly, but I'm too old and you're too practical for games. Marry me, Emma. Let me be your partner in all of this, not just your hired hand." "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married in late November by a circuit preacher who came through Silver Ridge. Emma wore her mother's dress, altered to fit, and Cole wore a new shirt purchased with his saved wages. Tom gave her away, his weathered face split in a huge grin. Jack and Samuel stood as witnesses, along with half the town who'd come to see the miracle woman who'd learned to walk again. Emma made it down the aisle on Cole's arm, her cane in her free hand. Her steps were slow and careful, but she was walking. 3 months ago, Doc Hendricks had told her she'd never walk right again. Now she was walking herself to her own wedding, and the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. The winter was hard, but they weathered it together. Cole moved into the main house, into Emma's room, and the small space became theirs. They learned each other in the cold, dark nights, Emma discovering that Cole's body was a map of scars from the war, Cole learning which touches made Emma gasp and which made her laugh. He continued to help with her exercises, pushing her to maintain and increase her strength, never letting her settle for less than she could achieve. "You're a tyrant," Emma complained one January morning, struggling to hold a standing position while balancing on just her own legs, no cane. "You love me anyway," Cole replied, not even looking up from the book he was pretending to read while timing her. "Unfortunately," Emma muttered, but she was smiling. By February she could walk almost normally, just a slight limp when she was tired. She ventured out to the barn, resuming some of her old duties. The horses remembered her, whickering in greeting. She couldn't ride yet, didn't trust her legs enough for that, but she could help with feeding, with grooming, with the 100 small tasks that made up daily ranch life. Spring arrived with muddy roads and the promise of new beginnings. Emma and Cole stood on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Her hand rested on her stomach, on the small swell that had appeared and confirmed what she'd suspected for the past month. "We should tell the others soon," Cole said, his hand covering hers. His voice was filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "They've probably already guessed," Emma said. "Tom's been giving me knowing looks for weeks, but yes, we'll tell them, after we figure out how we're going to manage a ranch and a baby." "The same way we manage everything else," Cole said, turning her to face him. "Together." The baby arrived in late October, almost exactly a year after Emma and Cole's first meeting. The labor was long and difficult, Emma's still healing body struggling with the demands. Cole stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, letting her squeeze until he thought his bones might break, murmuring encouragement and love. Their son entered the world screaming, a healthy 8 pounds with his father's dark hair and his mother's determination, evident in the furious way he protested his arrival. They named him James, after Emma's father, with the middle name Thomas for the man who'd become family. "He's perfect," Emma said, cradling the tiny bundle while Cole sat beside her on the bed, one arm around her shoulders. "Just like his mother," Cole said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Tom, promoted to ranch foreman the previous spring, took over most of the daily operations for the next few months, allowing Emma and Cole to adjust to parenthood. It was chaos. James was a terrible sleeper, waking every few hours demanding to be fed. Emma was exhausted in a way that made her injuries from the fall seem easy in comparison. But there was joy too. Watching Cole with their son, seeing the gentleness in those strong hands as he changed diapers and walked the floor at 3 in the morning, singing old war songs in a low rumble that somehow always settled the baby. Seeing her ranch not just surviving but beginning to thrive, the herd growing, the debts slowly being paid down. One evening in early spring when James was nearly 6 months old, Emma ventured out to the barn. It was the first time she'd been there alone since before her fall. She walked, her gait almost normal now, just a slight hitch in her left leg when the weather was changing. The barn smelled of hay and horses, familiar and comforting. Her mare, the one who'd thrown her, was in the third stall. Sunshine, a golden sorrel with a white blaze. Emma had been avoiding her, unable to deal with the complicated feelings the horse stirred up. But now she approached, extending her hand. Sunshine nickered softly, nuzzling Emma's palm. There was no malice in the horse, never had been. She'd been startled by a snake, had reacted on instinct. Emma ran her hand along the mare's neck, feeling the warm muscle beneath the sleek coat. "I don't blame you," Emma said softly. "I never did, not really. You were just being a horse. And maybe I needed to fall to find what I was really looking for." Talking to the horses now. Cole's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him leaning against the barn door, James asleep in his arms. "Just making peace," Emma said. She moved closer, running a gentle finger along their son's cheek. "You know, I've been thinking." "Dangerous," Cole teased. Emma swatted his arm lightly. "I'm serious, I want to try riding again." Cole's expression shifted, worry creeping in. "Emma, I know it's a risk," she said quickly. "But Cole, I can't live my life afraid. I'm stronger now than I was before the fall in some ways. My legs work. Maybe not perfectly, but well enough, and I miss it. I miss the freedom of riding, of being out on the land." Cole was quiet for a long moment, clearly torn between supporting her desire and protecting her from potential harm. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right, but we do it carefully. We start with short rides on gentle ground, and I'm with you every step." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Emma said. They began the next week. Cole saddled his own horse, a steady gelding named Ash, and the calmest mare in the string, a gray named Dove. He helped Emma mount, staying close as she settled into the saddle. For a moment, Emma felt panic rise. Her body remembered the fall, the terror and pain. But then Cole's hand was on her knee, steady and sure. "You've got this," he said. "I'm right here." Emma gathered the reins, feeling the familiar weight of them in her hands. She squeezed her legs, asking Dove to walk. The mare responded perfectly, moving forward with smooth steps. And Emma was riding. Actually riding for the first time in over a year. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. Cole rode beside her, ready to catch her if she faltered, but she didn't need catching. Her body remembered this, her legs gripped with enough strength, her balance held. They rode just to the edge of the property and back, maybe 20 minutes total, but it felt like flying. When they returned to the barn, Emma was exhausted and exhilarated. Cole helped her dismount, and her legs almost buckled from the unaccustomed exercise, but he caught her smoothly. "I did it," Emma said, laughing and crying at once. "Cole, I did it." "Never doubted you for a second," Cole said, though his voice was thick with emotion. That night, after James was asleep and they were alone in their room, Emma pulled Cole close. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For carrying me when I couldn't walk, for believing I would walk again. For staying." "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," Cole said, his arms tightening around her. "You're my home, Emma, you and James. This ranch, this life, it's everything I never knew I was looking for." The years unfolded with the kind of happiness Emma had once thought impossible. The ranch prospered, growing from a struggling operation to one of the more successful in the county. Emma and Cole worked side by side, true partners in every sense. Her limp faded to almost nothing, noticeable only to those who knew to look for it. James grew into a sturdy, curious toddler, then a bright child who showed signs of inheriting both his mother's stubbornness and his father's steady patience. When he was 3, Emma discovered she was pregnant again. This time the labor was easier, and their daughter entered the world on a bright June morning. They named her Lily Margaret, honoring both Cole's sister and Emma's mother. Tom eventually retired, though he stayed on the property in a small cabin Cole built for him. Jack married a girl from town and brought her to live on the ranch. Samuel took over as foreman, proving himself more than capable. The Thornton Ranch, now the Brennan Ranch in all but legal name, became known throughout Colorado for quality horses and cattle. But more than that, it became known as a place where second chances were given. Cole had a habit of hiring hands that others had written off, men down on their luck or recovering from injuries. "Everyone deserves a chance," he'd say, echoing the words he'd once spoken to Emma. And under his guidance, most of those men found their footing again. Emma took up teaching riding lessons for the children in town, especially girls who were told they were too delicate or too weak. She taught them to be strong, to be fearless, to get back up when they fell. She became known as someone who understood what it meant to fight your way back from something that tried to break you. On a warm evening in late summer, when Emma was 35 and Cole was 42, they stood on their porch watching their children play in the yard. James was 13 now, tall and lean, already showing promise as a horseman. Lily was 10, with her father's gray eyes and a spirit that kept them all on their toes. And between them ran 5-year-old Daniel, their surprise blessing, laughing as his older siblings chased him. "You ever think about that first day?" Emma asked, leaning into Cole's embrace. "When Doc Hendricks told me I'd never walk right again." "Every day," Cole admitted. "I think about how close we came to never having this, if you'd given up if I'd moved on to some other ranch." "I would have given up if you hadn't been there," Emma said honestly. "I wanted to so many times, but you wouldn't let me." "You never needed me to make you strong," Cole said, turning her to face him. "You were always strong, Emma. I just reminded you of that when you forgot." Emma rose on her toes, kissing him softly. After 13 years of marriage, the spark between them hadn't dimmed. If anything, it had grown deeper, more complex, woven through with shared history and partnership and genuine friendship. "Mama, Papa, come play," Lily called, waving frantically. "Duty calls," Cole said with a smile. He took Emma's hand and together they descended the porch steps. Emma moved easily now, no trace of the injury that had once threatened to define her life. She'd been told she'd never walk right again after the fall, but a cowboy had carried her until she could. And then he'd stayed, not because she needed carrying anymore, but because they'd both discovered that some burdens were meant to be shared, that some journeys were better taken together. As she ran to catch her laughing children, her husband beside her, Emma thought about the girl she'd been at 22, broken and afraid and certain her life was over. She wished she could go back and tell that girl what she knew now. That falling didn't mean failure. That accepting help wasn't weakness. That sometimes the worst thing that happened to you led directly to the best thing that could ever happen. She'd been told she'd never walk right again, but she'd learned to run instead. And she'd found someone who would run beside her, through whatever came next. The sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples and reds. The Brennan Ranch settled into evening quiet, the cattle lowing softly in the distance, the horses moving peacefully in their corrals. Inside the house, lamps were lit against the growing darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new joys and sorrows. But tonight there was just this. A family together, a home built on love and determination, and the knowledge that they'd faced the impossible and won. Emma had been told she'd never walk right again after the fall. A cowboy had carried her until she could. And in carrying her, he'd given her everything she'd ever truly needed: belief, support, partnership, and a love that would last the rest of their lives. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of ranch life, marked by seasons and the growth of their children rather than dates on a calendar. Emma and Cole faced the challenges that came their way the same way they'd faced everything since that first day. Together, with determination and unwavering support for each other. When James turned 16, he asked if he could start working with wild horses, breaking them for sale. Emma's first instinct was fear, remembering her own fall, but Cole had squeezed her hand and they'd agreed together. James had his mother's gift with horses and his father's patience. He became known throughout the territory for his gentle methods, never breaking a horse's spirit even as he trained them to saddle. Lily proved to have a head for numbers that neither of her parents possessed. By the time she was 14, she was keeping the ranch books, tracking expenses and income, negotiating prices with buyers who underestimated her because of her age and gender. She had her mother's fire and her father's steady determination, a combination that made her formidable. Daniel, the baby, was drawn to the land itself in a way his siblings weren't. He could tell you which pastures would provide the best grazing, could predict whether by reading the sky and the behavior of animals. At 8 years old, he already had the makings of a rancher born and bred. Emma and Cole watched their children grow with pride, and the bittersweet awareness that time was passing quickly. But they also found joy in the quieter moments, the evenings on the porch after the children were asleep, the early mornings riding out together to check the stock, the nights in their room where they came together with a passion that hadn't dimmed despite the years. "I love you more now than I did the day we married," Cole told her one night, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "That's because I'm less ornery now," Emma joked. "You're just as ornery," Cole said, laughing, "but I know all your tells now. I know when you're hurting and trying to hide it. I know when you're worried about money. I know when you're scared one of the kids is going to get hurt doing something foolish." "They get the foolishness from you," Emma said, but she was smiling. "The stubbornness is all you, though," Cole retorted. "Which is why we've made it this far. You never knew when to quit." Emma turned in his arms, looking at his face in the lamplight. He was older now, lines around his eyes and mouth, silver threading through his dark hair. But to her, he was as handsome as the day he'd walked into Doc Hendrick's office. "I knew when to fight, though. That's different from not knowing when to quit." "Smart woman," Cole murmured, pulling her close. When Emma turned 40, the entire county seemed to show up for the celebration. The ranch house overflowed with people, spilling out into the yard where long tables had been set up. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. Emma stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed by the evidence of the life she'd built. Hard to believe, isn't it? Tom said, coming to stand beside her. He was 74 now, his hair completely white, moving slower but still sharp as ever. "I remember when it was just you and your pa struggling to make ends meet. I remember when you found me on that trail," Emma said quietly. "When you rode like hell to get me to town, you saved my life that day, Tom." "Cole saved your life," Tom corrected gently. "I just got you to someone who could help. He's the one who refused to let you give up." Emma watched her husband across the yard, surrounded by a group of men, including their son James. Cole's head was thrown back in laughter at something someone had said. As if sensing her gaze, he looked over and their eyes met across the distance. The look he gave her was full of such love and pride that Emma felt her throat tighten. "We saved each other," she said to Tom. "I think that's how the best partnerships work." The years rolled on, bringing both joy and sorrow. Tom passed away peacefully in his sleep at 79, and the entire county mourned. Emma and Cole planted a tree in his memory on the ridge overlooking the ranch, where he could watch over the land he'd loved. James married at 21, bringing home a capable young woman named Sarah who fit seamlessly into ranch life. Within a year, they had a baby, making Emma and Cole grandparents for the first time. "I'm too young to be a grandmother," Emma protested, cradling the infant with a tenderness that belied her words. "You're 43," Cole said, amused. That's a perfectly reasonable age to be a grandmother. It makes me sound old, Emma grumbled, but she was smiling down at the baby, her granddaughter Rebecca. Lily announced at 18 that she wanted to attend college in Denver to study business and law. It was an unconventional choice for a young woman in 1894, and Emma worried about sending her daughter away. But Cole had supported Lily's dream, and together they'd made it happen. Lily thrived in Denver, coming home during summers full of ideas and energy, helping to expand the ranch's operations in ways Emma had never imagined. Daniel, at 15, showed no interest in leaving. The ranch was in his blood, and he'd already proven himself invaluable. Emma and Cole began to think of him as the future of the operation, the one who would carry it forward after they were gone. "Does that thought bother you?" Emma asked Cole one evening. They were in their early 50s now, still healthy and active but aware of their mortality in a way they hadn't been when they were younger. "That someday this will all be Daniel's and will just be memories?" Cole considered the question seriously. "No," he said finally. "We've built something that will last, Emma. Something that will take care of our children and grandchildren. That's more than most people get, and I figure we've got plenty of years left to enjoy it ourselves." He was right. Their 50s passed with surprising speed but also with deep contentment. They added more grandchildren to the family, as James and Sarah had 2 more children. And Lily eventually married a lawyer she met in Denver, settling in the city but visiting often with her own growing family. Daniel married at 23, and he and his wife Maria took over more of the daily operations, allowing Emma and Cole to step back slightly. But they never fully retired. Emma still rode out most mornings, checking on things, her trained eye catching details others might miss. Her body had held up remarkably well, the feared permanent disability nothing but a distant memory. She moved with only the slightest stiffness on cold mornings, no worse than anyone else her age. Cole remained the heart of the operation, the one people came to with problems, the one who could calm a spooked horse or a worried hand with equal ease. He'd aged gracefully, his hair gone completely silver, his face weathered but still strong. Emma thought he was more handsome now than ever, the years having given him a gravity that made him even more attractive. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Emma with a trip to Denver. They stayed in a hotel, attended the theater, ate in fancy restaurants. It was a different world from the ranch, but they enjoyed the novelty of it. On their last night, sitting in their hotel room overlooking the gaslit streets, Cole pulled out a small box. "You already gave me a gift," Emma said, confused. He'd presented her with a beautiful silver comb set earlier. "This is different," Cole said. He opened the box to reveal a locket. When Emma opened it, she found a tiny photograph of the 2 of them on one side, taken at James's wedding, and on the other side a pressed flower. "Is that?" Emma's breath caught. "From the bouquet you carried at our wedding," Cole confirmed. "I saved one. I've been keeping it all these years, waiting for the right time to give it to you." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Cole Brennan, after 30 years of marriage, you can still surprise me." "Good," Cole said, fastening the locket around her neck. "I never want to be predictable." "You're the most predictable man I've ever known," Emma said, laughing through her tears. "You'll always do the right thing, but I never quite know how you'll do it." That night, they made love with the tenderness of long familiarity mixed with the passion that had never quite faded. Afterward, lying in his arms, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that terrible day when she'd fallen, when her world had shattered, to this moment of perfect contentment. "Do you ever wonder how things would have turned out if I'd never fallen?" Emma asked. "If we'd never met, sometimes," Cole admitted, "but I don't dwell on it. The path we took, hard as it was, brought us here, and I wouldn't trade here for anything, even the hard parts," Emma pressed. "Especially the hard parts," Cole said firmly. "They're what made us strong enough to build this life. You think we'd be as good together if we hadn't fought through those first months? If I hadn't seen you at your lowest and you hadn't seen the same in me, Emma knew he was right. Their relationship had been forged in adversity, tempered by challenges, and what had emerged was stronger than steel. They knew each other completely, the good and the bad, and they'd chosen each other anyway, every day for 30 years. They returned to the ranch to find everything running smoothly under Daniel and Maria's management. Their grandchildren were growing, the oldest now 12, and showing signs of inheriting the family's way with horses. The ranch continued to prosper, its reputation solid throughout Colorado. Emma took on a new project in her 60s, writing down the history of the ranch, of her recovery, of the life she and Cole had built. She did it partly for her grandchildren, wanting them to know where they came from, but also because she'd received letters over the years from other women who'd heard her story, who'd suffered their own injuries or setbacks, and wanted to know how she'd overcome hers. "You're an inspiration," Cole said, reading over one of the letters. "I'm just someone who refused to give up," Emma said. "And who had you refusing to let me give up?" "That's what makes you an inspiration," Cole said. "Not that you didn't face obstacles, but that you faced them head-on. That you asked for help when you needed it. That you built something beautiful out of something broken." Emma's memoir, as simple and unpolished as it was, made its way through the county and beyond. Women wrote to thank her, to share their own stories. Emma responded to each letter personally, offering encouragement and, when possible, practical advice. It became another way of giving back, of taking the hard lessons she'd learned and using them to help others. As they entered their 70s, Emma and Cole finally began to slow down. Cole developed a persistent cough one winter that scared them both, but it cleared with spring. Emma's leg, which had served her so well for so many years, began to ache more frequently, arthritis setting into the old injury. But these were normal complaints for people their age, not the catastrophic disability she'd once feared. They spent more time on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, holding hands like young lovers. Their children visited regularly, bringing grandchildren and, eventually, great-grandchildren. The house that had once been so quiet, just Emma alone after her father's death, was now filled with life and laughter. "We've been blessed," Emma said one evening, her head resting on Cole's shoulder. They were 74 and 78 respectively, their hair silver, their faces lined, but their eyes still bright when they looked at each other. "We made our own blessings," Cole corrected gently. "We worked for every bit of this, Emma. Nothing was handed to us." "You were handed to me," Emma said. "The day Doc Hendricks asked if you'd help me, that was pure luck, or fate," Cole said. "I like to think I was meant to find you, that Lily sent me to you somehow, that all the hard things I went through were preparing me to be what you needed." "You were exactly what I needed," Emma agreed. "Even when I didn't want to admit it." Cole chuckled, the sound turning into a cough. When it passed, he said, "Remember that first day, how angry you were that I suggested you couldn't manage alone?" "I wanted to hit you," Emma admitted. "I know." "Your fists were clenched the whole conversation." Cole's arm tightened around her. "I'm glad you didn't. Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Inside the house, they could hear Daniel and Maria putting their youngest grandchildren to bed, the sounds of family life that had become the backdrop to their later years. "Cole," Emma said after a while, "Thank you for carrying me. Not just at the beginning when I literally couldn't walk, but every day since, through all of it." Cole turned to look at her, his weathered hand coming up to cup her face with the same gentleness he'd always shown. "Emma Brennan, it's been the honor of my life to walk beside you. And you've carried me just as much as I've carried you, don't ever think otherwise." They kissed, soft and sweet, a promise kept over 52 years together. When they finally went inside, Cole's arm was around Emma's waist, steadying her over the threshold. She leaned into him, accepting the support without shame or resentment, knowing he'd always be there to catch her if she stumbled. And she knew with absolute certainty that if he stumbled, she'd catch him too. That's what partners did. That's what love meant. Not that one person carried all the weight, but that they shared it, balanced it, made the burden lighter by dividing it between two hearts instead of one. She'd been told she'd never walk right again after the fall. A cowboy had carried her until she could. And then they'd carried each other through the rest of their lives, building something beautiful and lasting, proving that sometimes the things that break us are the things that make us whole. The years grew shorter as Emma and Cole entered their late 70s, but sweeter too, distilled down to what mattered most: family, land, and the love they'd nurtured for over half a century. They moved more slowly now, but they still moved together, still started each day with coffee on the porch, still ended it in each other's arms. Cole's cough returned the winter Emma turned 77, worse this time. The doctor, a young man who'd been just a boy when Emma had her accident, said it was pneumonia and prescribed rest and warmth. Emma nursed Cole through it with fierce determination, the roles from their early days reversed. She was the one bringing soup and medicine, the one sitting up through the long nights, the one refusing to let death have him. "You're not leaving me," she told him one particularly bad night when his breathing was labored and his fever raged. "We made a deal, Cole Brennan. We're in this together and I'm not ready to be done yet." Cole's eyes opened, fever bright but focused. "Not planning to go anywhere," he rasped. "Still got things to do." "Damn right you do," Emma said, but her voice shook. He recovered slowly as winter gave way to spring. But the illness had taken something from him, left him frailer than before. He couldn't do the physical work anymore, couldn't walk as far without tiring. Emma understood his frustration intimately, remembered her own rage at her body's betrayal all those years ago. "It's not the same," Cole protested when she said as much. "You were young, you had your whole life ahead of you. I'm an old man, this is just what happens." "You're my old man," Emma said firmly. "And I need you around as long as possible, so you'll take it easy and let the young ones do the heavy work, understand?" Cole grumbled. But he complied, accepting the chair on the porch, the shorter walks, the help he'd once given so freely to others. Emma stayed close, always within reach, just as he'd once stayed close to her. Their 80th and 84th birthdays were celebrated quietly, just family, but the love in the room was palpable. 3 generations surrounded them now, soon to be 4 with James's oldest daughter expecting her first child. The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's management, expanded and modernized but still true to the principles Emma and Cole had established. "We did good," Cole said, surveying his family. "We did," Emma agreed, her hand in his. That night, alone in their room, Cole held Emma close. "I want you to promise me something," he said. Emma tensed. She didn't like the serious tone in his voice. "What?" "If I go first, I need you to keep living, really living, not just existing. You're too strong, too vital to give up just because I'm gone." "Cole, don't." "Promise me, Emma." His arms tightened. "I couldn't bear the thought of you just waiting to die. You've got years left in you. Good years. Promise me you'll use them." Emma was quiet for a long moment, fighting back tears. Finally, she said, "Only if you promise me the same. If I go first, you don't give up either." "Deal," Cole said, but as it turned out, neither of them had to face that fear alone. They had 5 more good years. Years filled with great-grandchildren and quiet contentment, with sunsets and memories, with the steady comfort of a love that had weathered every storm. Emma died first, on a warm June morning just after her 82nd birthday. She'd been in the garden, tending the roses descended from her mother's original plantings when her heart simply stopped. She didn't suffer, didn't fall. She just sat down on the bench Cole had built for her, closed her eyes, and slipped away. Cole found her there 20 minutes later. For a long moment, he simply stood, looking at her peaceful face, the slight smile on her lips. Then he sat beside her, taking her hand one last time. "I knew you'd go first," he said softly. "You were always leading the way, but Emma, you didn't give me much time to prepare. Couldn't you have warned me?" He sat with her until Daniel came looking, until the house filled with family and tears and the terrible finality of loss. The funeral was huge, half the county turning out to pay respects to the woman who'd become a legend, the one who'd refused to accept the limits others tried to place on her. Cole stood at the graveside, his children and grandchildren surrounding him, and watched as they lowered Emma into the earth on the ridge she'd loved, where Tom's memorial tree still stood. The preacher spoke words about eternal rest and heavenly reward, but Cole barely heard them. He was remembering the first time he'd seen Emma, broken and angry in Doc Hendrick's office. The way her eyes had flashed fire even through the pain, the fierce determination that had driven her recovery, the love that had grown between them, unexpected and unstoppable. She was told she'd never walk right again after the fall, Cole said suddenly, interrupting the preacher. Everyone looked at him, but he kept his gaze on the grave. But she didn't listen. She fought and clawed and worked until she could walk, until she could run, until she could do everything they said was impossible. She taught me that the word never doesn't mean anything if you're brave enough to challenge it. She taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. She taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about finding someone worth fighting for, and she was worth every second of every fight. His voice broke, and he felt Daniel's hand on his shoulder, steadying him. I carried her for a little while at the beginning. But she carried me for the rest of my life, and I'll carry her memory until I see her again. The preacher finished the service and people began to drift away, offering condolences and memories. Cole stayed until the grave was filled, until only he and Daniel remained. "Dad," Daniel said gently. "We should go home." "I promised her I'd keep living if she went first," Cole said. "But I don't know how to do that without her, son. We've been together for 57 years. She's in every part of me." "Then you honor her by doing what she'd want," Daniel said. "You spend time with your family. You tell the great-grandchildren stories about her. You tend her garden and watch her sunsets and remember that she loved you with everything she had." Cole nodded slowly. "She did, didn't she? Love me, I mean. More than anything," Daniel confirmed. "And you loved her the same way." "That doesn't end just because she's gone." Cole lived for 2 more years after Emma's death. They were quiet years, spent mostly on the porch she'd loved, surrounded by family. He told stories to anyone who would listen, keeping Emma alive through memory and words. He wrote down everything he could remember about their life together, adding to the memoir she'd started, ensuring that future generations would know their story. He died peacefully in his sleep on a cold February night, just a few months after his 88th birthday. His children found him in the morning, still in the bed he'd shared with Emma, looking more at peace than he had since she'd passed. They buried him beside her on the ridge, under the big Colorado sky they'd both loved. Their stone was simple, just their names and dates, and below that, an inscription Daniel had suggested. She was told she'd never walk right again after the fall. A cowboy carried her until she could. Then they carried each other home. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, growing and changing but always remembering its roots. Emma and Cole's story became family legend, told to each new generation, a reminder that love and determination could overcome anything, that the worst moment of your life might lead directly to the best, that sometimes the people who help us stand are the ones we're meant to walk beside forever. And on summer evenings, when the sun sets over the mountains and paints the sky in impossible colors, if you stand on that ridge where 2 graves rest side by side, you can almost feel them there. Not gone, not really. Just transformed, their love woven into the land itself, eternal as the mountains, enduring as the legacy they built together. They'd faced the impossible and won. Not because they were special or chosen or blessed, but because they'd refused to accept defeat, because they'd let themselves be vulnerable, because they'd chosen love even when love seemed like the riskiest choice of all. She'd been told she'd never walk right again after the fall. A cowboy had carried her until she could. And in the end, they'd both learned that the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall, but the ones who fall and get back up, who accept help when they need it, and who extend that same help to others. They'd learned that love isn't about finding someone to complete you, but finding someone to complement you, someone whose strengths balance your weaknesses and vice versa. The Brennan Ranch still stands today, well over a century after Emma and Cole built it into what it became. The descendants still live there, still raise horses and cattle, still tell the story of the woman who refused to accept impossible and the cowboy who believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. And somewhere in whatever comes after, Emma and Cole are together still, finally free of the limitations of aging bodies, running through endless fields under infinite skies, their love a beacon that death couldn't dim, a testament to the power of two hearts that refused to give up on each other, no matter what the world threw at them. They'd been told many things in their lives, had faced countless obstacles and challenges, but they'd faced them together, and in the end, that had made all the difference. Their story wasn't about a miracle cure or an impossible recovery, though those elements were part of it. It was about something simpler and more profound. Two broken people who found each other, who helped each other heal, and who built something beautiful from the wreckage of what they'd lost. It was about choosing love over fear, hope over despair, action over resignation. And it was about the truth that sometimes the person who carries you when you fall is the person you're meant to spend your life walking beside, through whatever storms may come, until the very end and beyond.